Welcome back here to the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. Again, just so humbled that you would press play week after week here. It's amazing after, we're 300 episodes in and still going strong. And we're only going strong because you actually listen. If no one listens, I just stop doing this. So super grateful for you. So welcome here to the Gill Connections podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cunningham. We are here to uplift and honor coaches from around the country. And today, you've already seen who the guest is. It's not this big reveal, right? You press play, you already saw the title. But today is something even more special. One, we're going to do what we love to do, uplift and honor a coach, and we'll introduce her in 1 second. But we've got some huge, awesome, great news for our sport. It's easy to talk about the negative, but this is a super positive. And as soon as I heard about this, I don't think I finished reading the article and immediately shot her an email, said, hey, we've got to talk about this. We've got to amplify this. So help me welcome the head coach of the Northwestern, the Wildcats, just north of me up here in Evanston, Northwestern University, the wise, the wonderful Jill Miller. Jill, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. Thanks for having me today.
If you're watching on YouTube, we're wearing our matching purple today. I'm on board with Northwestern. Jill, before we get into your journey, let's do just a quick talk. We're going to get into it a little bit more near the end. But Northwestern did what we sometimes think is the impossible. We like to think that this never happens, only the opposite happens. But Northwestern came out a couple of weeks ago, I think at this point, and said, we are going to add track and field. You've got a cross country program. We're going to add track and field to the athletic department. Holy cow, that's amazing. I assume you're on board with this. You're not sharpening up your resume and saying, "Well, I only want to do cross country." This is great news for you and your program. Yes.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Something that we've been working on for a long time. This is the start of my sixth year at Northwestern. In full transparency, this was not something I worked on my first or second year. When I took this job, the athletic director who hired me, Jim Phillips, who's now the commissioner of the ACC, he was really honest about who we are and what we have been since 1998 when the program was reinstated was a cross country only program. And I understood that. I fully understood it and came here with an opportunity to lead my own program, which I felt was really important at that point in my career, and really got excited about the core values of Northwestern. As a female coach who has, for the most part, coached female student athletes, it was something about the investment in female student athletes here that got me really excited. When I walk into work, I am empowered by female leaders from top to bottom here at Northwestern. My office is next to our national champion field hockey coach, just down the hallway, national champion lacrosse coach. And I could go on and on from not just Tracy and Kelly, but to Emily Fletcher in golf, to Rachel Stratton Mills in swim and dive, to Claire Pollard in our women's tennis program, and Kate Drohan in our softball program. There's just amazing programs with amazing female leaders that I felt on my interview like these women are going to be by my side trying to make the most of this program in the form that it's in right now. That was really inspiring alongside of seeing, hearing, and feeling the investment that the department puts into those sports. So that initially was really exciting to me, but I also understood like there's going to be limitations here in terms of being cross country only. In the weirdest way, like we didn't want to find recruits that really wanted cross country only. We wanted to fight them on the track side because we wanted people who really want that full championship experience and then found ways to maximize the setup within those limitations. And so first year brought COVID and things shut down.
Well, okay. So I'm a weirdo. I like to go in chronological order. So I'm going to pause you there because we're going to get up to Northwestern and then talk more about adding the program here. So you're like a good coach. You're 3 steps ahead of me already. I get it. I get it. So let me pause you there and let's get in our Wayback Machine and let's actually start about Jill Miller. Where does track even start for you? Assuming that you were a runner, did you start running in middle school, high school? Maybe not at all. Where does track start for you?
Yeah, actually, if I stood up, you'd notice I'm 5 foot nothing. And maybe don't look like certain types of athletes, but I do probably look still a little bit like a gymnast. So
Oh,
that's how I really grew up in sport, was being in the gym a ton as a gymnast. And then ultimately when I quit going into high school, I tried every sport in the book. Um, Went out for the track team. I was like, I'm pretty good at this.
hmm,
But then it wasn't until my sophomore year that I ran cross country for the first time.
hmm,
So I started the longer stuff a lot later in my high school career, but had an awesome high school coach.
hmm.
And his name is Rod Zodi. His dad, Chuck Zodi, was a long-term director of cross country and track and field at Miami of Ohio. So that really got me interested in the sport, really got me interested in coaching. And I think that's where it all started.
What, so, and you mentioned Rod Zodi's dad being a long time at Miami of Ohio. I used to coach at Ball State, so I'm very familiar with Miami of Ohio in our conference. Where is this? Are you growing up in Ohio? Is this where this is going on?
Yeah, so I grew up just outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Perfect. And you mentioned you played a lot of sports. What I'm always fascinated with, track is it's a tough sport. Not normally a very team oriented like a softball or a volleyball or a football. Very tough, especially if we're talking about distance running, grueling, you got to get the miles in, things like that. You said you played a lot of sports. What drew you to track and field and cross country as your main sport, or eventually your main sport at least?
I think there was something that I really loved about the work that I poured in. I could see the return on that
Mhm.
investment. Um, I also could be described a bit as a pain seeker. Like I love figuring out like how hard
Yeah.
can you push yourself? What is your true limitation? Let's find it. Many times in high school, I think if you talk to my high school coach, he would just say like I would just run so hard, maybe not so smart, but run so hard, and he'd have to find me, like behind the bleachers, vomiting up whatever I ate
Oh,
that day,
dude.
because there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. It was just like, how hard can I run? For how long can I run? And that was just kind of a part of my DNA, probably from how I was raised.
Yeah.
And then through gymnastics. I mean, gymnastics is a sport of mental and physical toughness for
Mm.
sure. So I really love that part of it. And then, got sucked into the relays. So running the 4x8 and finding the camaraderie in a team and being really inspired by that. Um, those were the things that I
Yeah.
really loved initially about the sport when I didn't really know too much about training, recovery, how to make it all work. I probably could have been a lot better than I was if I had known some of those training principles, but it was really just the like, how hard can you push yourself? How much can you get out of yourself in your training and your racing? And I really loved that.
You mentioned you kind of came late to the distance side. When you first joined track, did you do other events first before kind of pushing over to the distance events?
Yeah, I was in a program where they made you try everything, and of course, I'm like, I don't think the
Yeah.
high jump's gonna be for me, but we'll try it. We'll throw that discus once.
Did
Um,
you really?
oh yeah, we tried
Oh,
everything.
that's cool.
We
I love
we
that.
tried everything, and ultimately ran the 400. And I actually went out for track the end of eighth grade, which was still middle school for us, and then
Mhm.
went again in high school. And I'm proud to say, to my best knowledge, I think I still own the 400 record at my middle school. But then realized like that's actually just not that quick. Like we're gonna have to start going longer and longer. And my high school program had a lot of success in front of me. So I stepped into a program who had the state champion in the mile, state champion in the 2 mile.
Oh, wow.
So it's just really some awesome folks to say, like, here, since I didn't know the X's and O's, like,
Mm.
let me help you with this training and these workouts. And so that was really inspiring to me.
I like that they made you do every event for a couple of reasons. One is you never know, right? I mean, we
It's true.
found a lot of hurdlers because we put some sticks in their way and said, let's see what it looks like and things like that. And it's easy for us to pigeonhole people into certain events based on many factors. And in fact, they could have been the best one over here in this event. So I love just the kind of the just let's make sure our athletes are going in the right direction. But also, I have to believe that give you some respect and admiration for the other events and therefore your other teammates. So instead of just ignoring the discus throwers on your team, you're like, man, I tried that and I was no good. Look how far she throws. Like, that's awesome. I just like that. That feels like a good, easy air quotes there, maybe culture builder of like team, like, oh, we're going to be a team first and you're going to at least try. Even my 5 foot nothings, we're going to try high jumping
Mhm.
out there. So
It's, it's almost what we see at the Olympic Games when we watch people in track and field and they make it look so easy. And I think I saw a comedian say, like, what we should do is we should have like someone, just a normal person, go try to jump over that hurdle.
right.
And and so it does, it gives you that respect when you try something and you're like, this is really hard. And I'll give it to as Mr. and Mrs. Barry at Grizel Middle School. They made it so much fun.
Mm.
And so there was just this openness, this welcomeness. And I mean, after every practice, the old ice pops, that you would push up and everybody get their ice
Yes.
pops and have so much fun with it. It was a great way to enter the sport and understanding all the event areas, but also making a sport that can be really hard and really painful a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, that's cool. You mentioned your high school coaches, Coach Zodi, and probably some others, really helped instill the love of team and track and field, and really maybe even the thought of being a coach. What was it? What was their style? What was their? You mentioned push pops. That would probably be enough for me. I'd be all in for that alone. But what was it about their style and character that you're like, man, I like maybe I want to be this for a living one day.
Yeah, I mean, in middle school was about fun. And then in high school, what I liked was the intensity.
Hmm.
I think most of my athletes would probably describe me as a fairly intense person. And I liked that intensity that I felt out of my high school coach, most likely because he understood what the next level was
Hmm.
going to look like. And so there was a lot of care and concern, but there was also a lot of intensity that just made me really excited. I'm someone that likes to work really hard. I like to be pushed really hard. I like to have hard conversations because I know they're going to lead to me being better. And him doing that, not just with myself, but with all of our team and seeing the success that came from it, that was something that I just really loved.
Okay, so for everybody who listens, they know I'm kind of a tangent interviewer and just conversationalist in general. You had said something that's kind of interesting. It's going to take us a little bit out of the timeline. It'll be my job to kind of get us back in the timeline. But you said it's a see, as the host of the podcast, Jill, I get to do whatever I want. I get to ask questions and really just it's this is all for me so that I'm a very curious person. I just want to know and learn more stuff. You said something that struck me because it's something I believe in, but it's not something that I have seen that maybe the majority or even a lot of people in society necessarily believe in. You said, I like to have hard conversations. I agree with that. I think one of the ultimate um, testaments of a friendship or relationship or kinship is, can I have a hard conversation and our relationship still moves on, moves forward. It's not that I don't like you because I have a hard conversation, but I had to learn that from somewhere. That had to be modeled, that you could have disagreements, hard conversations even, and yet that doesn't affect your relationship negatively. Where for you, where does that, I don't know that that's a born thing, something you're just born with. Where was that modeled for you? Where did you get taught that? How did you see that you could have hard conversations, even seek them? Because for me, I'm gonna put words in your mouth here a little bit. They strengthen relationships is what they do. And that's kind of why I like them.
Yeah, I would say it certainly comes from how I was raised
Hmm.
and also being raised to play every sport that I possibly could.
Hmm.
And so there were things that I was good at and there were things that I was not good at. Like I played basketball my freshman year of high school, and that might not have been my best idea. But you know what? Like I listened to my dad, who's like, "You are not a good shooter. Pass the ball. You
Hmm.
can play defense. You have not honed your shooting skills. So play defense, hustle, and pass the ball." Okay. Yeah. And it's not, oh, now I feel bad about myself because I'm not a great shooter. It's like, that's really honest. And I have two choices: to listen to him, play hard defense, pass the ball, or get outside and practice, 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 and see if you can make
Right.
yourself a better shooter. And so I would say goes back to how I was raised, consistently trying new sports and seeing where I was good, where I wasn't good. And when I wasn't good, it wasn't like give up. It was like, how can you make yourself better? And so as a coach, I feel that that's my job.
Hmm.
And I tell my athletes all of the time, it is my love language. Me having a hard conversation with you, when you start to learn, like, that's how I express my love for you,
Mhm.
you're going to learn how to listen. You're going to learn how to ask the right questions. You're going to learn how to change and ultimately grow. And so I tell them, I'm like, the only time you should be really concerned is when we're not having hard conversations, because the whole point of my job is to empower you to grow in meaningful ways. And I just don't think that happens without having hard conversations, without noticing where someone's doing really well and someone's not doing well and saying, like, hey, you need to be really proud of these things. And here are the things that we need to work on. And so one of my student athletes recently told me a long story that the main point of it was, thank you for teaching me how to get in trouble. And I was like, tell me more about that. She's like, I know how to get in trouble. Like, I know in other areas of my life, when someone has to have a hard conversation with me, I need to listen attentively. I can disagree, but I can disagree respectfully and try to understand the other person's point of view on the issue at hand. And then I can ask meaningful questions of like, how do I change so this doesn't happen again? And as much as I don't think she was thinking that that was gonna like make me feel really proud, she just kind of was, she was sharing it in almost a humorous way. I took a step back. I'm like, that's a really big deal. Like if you can teach someone, in her words, how to get in trouble, but it's really how to have a hard conversation in a hard moment, I think that's a really big deal
Yeah.
and something that not many people have the opportunity to give that impact to somebody of 18 to 23 years of age, and they can carry that on for the rest of their life.
Yeah, I agree. You know, in society, whether it's business or even when I was coaching in athletics, it seems to be I'm nicer if I don't confront or have that hard conversation. And I've just for a long time I've always thought it's like, well, you're actually if you won't have a difficult conversation with me, I think you don't have my best interest at heart. Then, like we're not as close as maybe I thought or you thought. Like if you can't have that conversation. I'm not sure we're as close as you think we are, and that's not a good thing. So I love that, and I love that. What a great retort back of man! You taught me how to get in trouble. I knew exactly as soon as you said, it, I knew exactly where she was at, and that's awesome. I love that. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go back to high school. Doing a lot of different sports. We get into track. We get into distance running. We like to push ourselves so hard that coach is looking for you because you're behind the seating area. I love that. Talk to me about where do we go from here? Where do we go to college? And specifically, like, so where'd you pick and how'd you pick it? But I really want to know is because most of our people don't know by 18 that they want to be a track coach and specifically even a college coach. What were you thinking? What was I'm going to college to become a doctor, a teacher, a journalist? What was the thought back as an 18-year-old?
Yeah, it's interesting just thinking back to how much we didn't know. I mean, my generation was like the internet was just starting to be a thing. I can remember the old AOL dial-up sound, and like we weren't really on the internet. And I think back to like how much I didn't know. And it's pervasive of all areas of life. I didn't know a ton about the sport. I was just out there running as hard as I could. Um, I didn't know a lot about colleges and universities. I knew a little bit. My sister being 3 years older than me, I kind of was the little kid that had to be back in the back seat of the car, going to every school that she wanted to look at, which was really great. I always didn't want to get out and see every school, but my parents were like, "You're getting out. We are not coming again." And so I knew a little bit, but not a ton.
Yeah.
And I actually had a high school teammate who was 4 years older than me that went to Wake Forest. And so he told the women's coach, like, hey, you should look at this girl from my high school. And so that was the connection with Wake Forest. And when I visited there, just really liked it being a smaller school, more intimate environment, and went to Wake Forest with, I would say, like a wide ranging thoughts of what I might want to do.
Mhm.
Coaching was on that list. And then in full transparency, when you go to a school with academic rigor and you have all of these opportunities at your fingertips, there was some voice in my head, and I'm not sure where it came from, that was a little bit like, okay, you've come here, like you probably should go to law school or medical school. Like I'm not sure if coaching is something that, is really going to exercise your brain and be something that you want to do for the rest of your life. But that's also me not really knowing everything about coaching.
Right.
From a student athlete's perspective, they may not know or don't need to know all of the things that go into my day.
Right.
They see the couple hours at practice or us on the road. And myself as a college student athlete, like I didn't know everything that was going into it. And so after I graduated from Wake Forest, I went back to Columbus, started working for a state level lobbyist, and entered graduate school at Ohio State. While I was at graduate school at Ohio State, my high school coach let me come out and coach the high school team while I was around and in the area. And I just noticed having so much more passion for like, when can I get out of the office and get over to the high school track and connect with these young people and inspire them. And so it was that made me realize, like, okay, I can always come back to this grad school program. I'm going to give this a shot. And man, I probably sent 100+ letters, like not emails, letters on letterhead, um, coloring them to the school that I was applying to or trying to get a job to, trying to be really creative and show like I really want to get in this. Um, and ultimately got myself my first job in college coaching, but it wasn't like it was something always in the back of my head. And then when I entered into the coaching profession, pretty soon thereafter, I was like, okay, I'm not going back. Like I'm most likely not going back to finish that degree, to the chagrin of my father, but maybe at some point I'll finish that one out.
Okay, lot to unpack there. Not 100 topics there. One of them being you color coded your resume, cover letter to the school. I mean, I would have hired you just for, I mean, that is genius. We've had, again, we're 300 episodes in, 6 years in. Several people have told us similar stories about, I hand wrote 100 letters to get my first job and things like that. And that's, I mean, if you want to define the word hustle, that to me is hustle. Like, man, I won't stop until I get into the profession I want to get into. No one has said when I applied to Northwestern, it was purple. And when I applied to Ohio State, it was, was it scarlet? And I don't want to get the colors wrong. I know how the Ohio State is.
Scarlet Gray.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's phenomenal to me. I love that. That's really cool. Is there an art background or where? I mean, that's kind of a unique thinking there.
No, I think it's just, you've got to get yourself to stand out some
Yeah.
way, somehow. And for me, I was like, okay, I can personalize these a little bit and show how interested I would be. And honestly, to show, I'll be oriented to the details. And in my
Mm,
opinion, in coaching, that matters.
yeah.
To notice things, to pick up on things, whether it be about a student athlete or just like all of the logistics involved in what we're doing or everything involved in recruiting.
Mhm.
Like you need to have a keen eye for the details. And so I thought maybe that would speak to it, that, I'm putting a little bit more thought into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember going to, I think it was like Dick Blick at the time, and getting all of these different colors of paper, and then going to Kinko's, which my athletes told me recently this no longer exists. Like, don't talk about going to Kinko's, it's FedEx still.
Oh no, I
But
didn't know
just
that
going to,
either.
yeah, learned something new today. And taking them and making all the copies and personalizing them. So that's where I started.
Dude, that's so cool. I love that. I love that. Hop back. So, undergrad at Wake Forest, a beautiful area, by the way. Cool. I love the campus, very small. The building's very kind of old school architecture with it. I love how the track sits down. I always thought that was very cool when I visit. You graduate there and you go into the private sector working for a lobbyist. So were you like a political science? Like why that? That seems very out of the blue. I've never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, so I was a double major, political science and psychology.
Okay.
And I thought the route might be law school.
Hmm.
Took the LSAT, did really poorly.
Oh no.
And what I've heard about the LSAT is it's really a direct correlation to how you'll do in law school. So I was like,
Oh,
that's not for
ouch.
me.
Yeah.
And went home, met a state level lobbyist working in healthcare at the time. Really interesting. I think most people kind of forget this era, but it was all revolving around stem cell research, which had a ton of misinformation at
Mm,
the time in the early 2000s, that it had something to do with killing babies and
mhm.
all these things. It was like, no, this is medical research. And so it was getting into state level lobbyists to fund stem cell research to help ultimately move towards
Hmm.
cures for certain diseases. So it was very interesting work. Some of it was discouraging to see how government functions at
Mm.
that level, but very interesting and led me to enter the program at Ohio State, the John Glenn School of Public Administration.
Oh, okay. What was the like? What do you do with a master's in public administration? Is that more localized government?
Yeah, in working, you can go a lot of different ways with it. It would depend on where you specialize. So some people specialize more on the economic side of things, the policy side of things, or actual administration, and moving into politics. So you could go a lot of different routes with it.
Okay. So while you're doing that, you start helping out back home,
Mhm.
and this kind of ignites the way it was interesting to see your face when you got to this part of the story. It wasn't the same as when we were talking about being a lobbyist, by the way. There was a little bit of like life came back to you there in your face when you started talking about that. This kind of ignited a little flame that was there that maybe you didn't even know was there.
Yeah. And just, as an athlete, you have to be somewhat selfish and oriented and focused on your own goals. And this was that
Mhm.
shifting of like, I can help other people articulate their goals and then help move the needle towards those goals. And just how incredibly impactful that felt. It also, like, I'm someone that I have a lot of energy. I like to be up and about and moving. We do spend quite a bit of time in the office, but I love the fact that like we also can just be like out actually doing things outside of an office environment. So all those things just felt like this fits alongside of some organizational skills that I have. And so I was like, okay, as I'm learning more about coaching and what it takes, this is starting to feel really right. And hence why I decided to apply to as many schools as I possibly could. I shouldn't even say apply. It wasn't apply. It was like just send letters to these people in hopes that they have
Yeah,
jobs
yeah,
that
yeah.
open
Oh, nice.
in programs that I feel excited about.
How did you, when you first started working with your old high school, so you're working with 14, 18-year-olds, you are at least describing yourself as a very intense person. You personally like to um, go 100%, 110% into the wall, those kind of things. But when we're dealing with 14, and you saw this as a 14, 18-year-old, you saw this as a high schooler, that there were plenty of people on your team that did not have that attitude. I'll say we all joined the track team for many different reasons. That's kind of the for me that's kind of the cool thing about track and field. There's a spot for everybody, short, tall, big, small, black, white, doesn't matter. There is some event that you can have some success in. And so some people join for the social aspect. Some people join because they were told they were fast. And so they want to become an Olympian. Many different reasons. How did you handle, or how did you at least recognize, because you may not have to, when we're first starting to coach, we don't know what we're doing. I don't, no one starts their first year of coaching like super prepared. Have yet to see that. How did you handle, explore that there were girls on the team and guys on the team that you could treat them like you were like, okay, I know this person needs to do extra 400-meter repeats or whatever. This person, okay, probably can't yell at this person because they will just crumble, and that is not why they're here. How did you handle it? Did you over? Um, it's kind of an awkward question. I'm sorry, Jill. When did you, and maybe you're going to tell me you still to this day haven't, that's fair, realize, oh, I've got to coach people in different styles, no matter what my preferred style might have been or may be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is why it's so important to understand with each student athlete, as cliche as it sounds, what is your why?
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's something that's been really thought through and you can get on board. And for others, I mean, I think you have to have a lot of conversation about like, if that's your why is that your why?
Right.
And does that come from maybe a place where you do doubt yourself and you don't want to set big goals for yourself, but why? Like, why is that? And really piece it apart. So it's not for me to, you know, push against anybody's why, but to really understand how we landed there is something really important to me with, the college age population that I work with. If you look back to high school, I think I knew pretty quickly that probably wasn't for me, high school coaching.
Mm-hmm.
For the fact of the matter, like you should have like a really wide range of people who are in it for social interaction that's important in high school, all the way to the people that want to go win state and national titles. For me, this is why I more so wanted to enter the college ranks to be able to narrow that window. And obviously, we're out there recruiting, sharing what we want out of student athletes in terms of their vision. And not that we have, something homogenous in terms of the why, but that we get to a place where most, if not all of my student athletes really want to be coached.
Yeah, I got
And
it.
it's
Yeah.
my personal opinion that great athletes really want to be coached and they want that hard feedback and they want to have those hard conversations. And I'm not saying everyone on
Mhm.
every roster that I've ever had is that way. And then it becomes very important to understand the communication style, to understand the motivation style, to understand their upbringing and why they think the way that they think,
Mhm.
so that you can make sure you're making an impact in the most meaningful way possible. And if you don't take time to do that, you will slip up and you will have situations where you're like, this is a great example of intent versus impact. My intention was really positive, but I didn't slow down to read the room and read this student athlete that, like, that's not going to be helpful for
Mhm.
her. And so that's something really important to me is developing the one-on-one individual relationship with each student athlete. By the time that they're seniors or and fifth years, we just know each other so well because of so many interactions, not just 6 days a week at practice, traveling on the road, but coming in for individual meetings every other week, really getting to know each other. And something I tell my first years a lot is like, don't expect our relationship to look like it looks like with the seniors and think that
Mhm.
you're doing something wrong. This is going to take time. This is going to take a lot of interactions. And I notice now with my first years, like they'll stop by a lot more often just to have those informal interactions because they matter. They matter in terms of understanding that student athlete and how can I get the most out of that student athlete. It's not going to look the same for each and every one of them. They're all different. They all come from different backgrounds. Their why is going to vary. I wouldn't say it varies tremendously like it does in high school,
Mhm.
but there is variation in that, and understanding it, I think, is really, really important if you're going to maximize your student athlete's time with you.
Yeah, I think you verbalized something I have heard from other successful coaches about the athletes' why. Sometimes we get caught up in trying to make the runners run for our why, and instead of learning what their why is, and it can be it can be very varied. Even so, as a whatever top program you want to think of that wins nationals every year, whatever, even those kids you think, oh, well, every one of those kids, their why is to win the national title. I guarantee you, not all of them, even in the high level college that you guys live in, there are some that are like, you know what, I'm leveraging my athletic ability for an athletic scholarship so that I can get a degree from this play. That's my why, is I ultimately want a degree with this university on it. And so you got to nuance that a little differently than the person who comes to you and says, yeah, I've come here because I want to win a national title and go to the Olympics. Okay, we're going to maybe talk a little bit differently about some different topics that way. So I love the way you verbalize that about learning their why, and it's not necessarily about your why. Another topic that you brought up, we're not going to get into it too much because I want to keep moving forward, but I do want to remind people that are listening. You said something that it took this podcast for me. I coached college track for 10 years and fairly high level. I made it to the SEC. And it took a conversation with Cameron Babb, who's the head coach of Washburn University in Kansas. And he shared a story. What you said there about as an athlete, you have to be selfish. As a coach, you have to be selfless. Paraphrasing a little bit here about what you're outputting towards the athletes. Cameron was a decathlete. I'll do a quick summary of this story. Uh, was working with the throws coach. He was a decathlete, and just when he's telling me the story, he's like, "Yeah, I just did not I just didn't mesh with her. There was something about just her style or whatever. It wasn't good, Mike. And I was like, oh man, okay, well, that happens, you know. Fast forward, he becomes a coach and he tells the story that he's at the USTF CCCA convention. And he goes, and I sit down with this throws coach and taking in, you know, what how they teach and, you know, things like, and it's really like it helped. Boy, it made me a better throws coach for my decathletes. And then he kind of just, I mean, just a throwaway. He goes, yeah, it's funny. That was my college throws coach. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Not too long, like literally like within 2 or 3 years, go back and you were at odds. And now here you are as a coach and you were, I mean, you're, you know, putting her on the mountaintop. She really helped you. And it was like, oh, as an athlete, you have to be selfish. What the coach tells you, you're trying to figure out how do I make me the best thrower in that example or distance runner. When you're a coach, whenever you're learning things, it's like, okay, how do I process this so that I can teach this out to others? So it was just really, it is, you know, saying that you're selfish in society is a bad thing. Like people would look at you if you go around and say, yeah, I'm selfish. Like, oh, what the heck's wrong with you? But in reality, our athletes, they have to be selfish. They have to uh, not go out on weekends till 2 o'clock in the morning. They have to stay away from friends. They have to study differently. They have to spend their time differently for themselves. And I don't know. I don't know that I know any level of athlete of success that isn't selfish. They may not express it and say selfish, but they are. And bravo, because they need to be.
Yeah, and I think it's especially interesting and important to highlight with female student athletes.
Hmm.
I think the way in which young girls are socialized is especially true to say like being selfish is a bad thing.
Hmm.
Um, so the two things that we really try to dismantle would be that notion along with the like be balanced and you can have it all.
Hmm.
Those are things that really bother me
Hmm.
when I feel, you know, that that's being put in our student athletes' ears because the reality is you can't have it all. Like if you want to do 100 things really well on this campus, you're not going to do them really well. You might do them, but you're not going to do them really well. And teaching them to say, what are my priorities? And then be okay with the imbalance there. Because if it's a priority, let's just get rid of that notion that you're imbalanced in any way. You are making an
Hmm.
active decision to align your energy with your priorities and earmuffs or blinders, whatever you need to put on to the outside world that's telling you you can do it all and you should have more time for this. That is not their decision. That is your decision. And if you want to be great at something, you're going to have to really understand your priorities, how to align your energy with those priorities,
Hmm.
and at times be very selfish in that endeavor.
Yeah.
And that is fine.
You're
I don't
you're
think our young women hear that enough.
you're a bad person because you're not hanging out with me enough. You're wasting your time in college because you're not doing the stereotypical college thing, the bar thing until 2 o'clock at night, and you didn't go to Cancun for spring break. Well, you're wasting. It's like, man, I'm not. I'm actually very focused on the goal sets that I have to maximize the time that I do have. Because again, time is finite for anything we do, whether it's college, athletics, life itself. Awesome. Okay, Jill. So I love your self-awareness. You're working with the high school team. You're realizing like, okay, I might need a few less people who are here to socialize only, and be a little bit more focused on what I think we can do in this sport. You send out hundreds of letters. Not even, okay, I love your correction there. You didn't apply to hundreds of jobs. You were like, hey, that's a cool school. Here's a letter for you. You got anything for me? I love that. So what fruit came from that's a lot of work. What came from those Kinko's trips? Kinko still exists. In my mind, it does for sure, for sure.
Yeah, we'll keep it alive in our minds. So I actually started my career at Brown University.
Wow.
And
Holy cow. So you go straight. I mean, you did go to Wake Forest, which is kind of like the Ivy League of North Carolina. I get it. So you go to Brown. Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but that floored me. Go ahead.
yeah, so I went to Brown and really grateful now at this point in my career being at Northwestern. So being at the sixth best institution in the nation, when you talk about noise, we're going to probably get some music here from lacrosse practice starting up. So let me know if that's too loud.
All good.
Um, and understanding everything about the Ivy League is something I am so grateful for at this point in my career because we recruit against them. And
Right.
so understanding the ways in which we can be confused with an Ivy League institution because of our academic rigor, but we are so different and we operate in such different ways. Being a part of the Big Ten conference, and like I said earlier, just so grateful to understand how their admissions processes work, how things work with financial aid, so that I can understand on the other side at Northwestern how I can help a recruit navigate that world where they may be looking at us in another Ivy League school and could slip up in thinking that certain things happen the way that they happen within the Ivy
Mhm.
Leagues, and they just don't.
Mhm.
So I would say that kind of started what I would say the first at least decade of my career of just learning
Mhm.
so much. And I would say, especially from with my first three jobs, just so grateful to have people let me do things and let
Mhm.
me figure it out and make mistakes and figure out how to move through it. I'd say every step of the way in my career, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know those things, when I was at Brown. And I still, connect with student athletes that I coach there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew like nothing. And I'm so sorry that I knew nothing. I was just really learning and trying to make an impact. And I think back to that time, which seems almost blurry. It was so long ago of like, did I make an impact? And I'm
Mhm.
sure I made a million more mistakes than I make today because that just comes with experience. Um, but I actually had a former student athlete's mom send me a card that I wrote her daughter when I was at Brown. And it was a handwritten note that I wrote her before HEPS. And I was actually like, I am so proud that that is what I wrote when I was 23 years of
Wow.
age. I was
Yeah.
almost scared to open it, like, oh no, what did
Yeah.
I
What did
write?
I say?
And then I was like, okay, deep breath. Like, I am really proud of that. And it was just sharing my belief in her. She actually went on to win the 5K at that meet. And that just meant a ton to me to look back because I really want to redo a lot of those years with the knowledge that I have now. But also, I have to be really grateful for the experience I had there. And then next step to William and Mary, where I just learned so much. So much about the X's and O's of the sport,
Hmm.
so much about how to do more with less within, a mid-major school that we ultimately took to the national championship and finished 12th. We kind of like that little school that could aura that we had, and those young women that I still connect with to this day. Like it just was such a meaningful experience. We have more inside jokes than you think you could create in 3 years, but they went from being just a very mediocre team to a really great team. And that was such a fun thing to be a part of, but also just such an amazing learning experience for me. Um, to then step over to Wisconsin, where it was like, wow, mid-major to Power Five school. Mick still teases me the first time we hosted a meet, and I'm like, "Do I need to mow the course?" And he's like, "I'm like, flag it. Do we need to go flag the
Yeah.
course?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Jill, you show up. Like we have an event management group. I'm like, okay, when we hosted at William Mary, like actually thought it was kind of fun. The manual labor days, like you just kind of leave your office work and you go out and you mow the course and you do all of the things. And as much as it's wonderful to not have to do all those things and really focus on coaching and recruiting. Um, I'm really grateful that I know everything that it takes
Yeah.
to put all of those things together. So I'm just so grateful to have so many different experiences from Brown to William Mary to Wisconsin. And then you kind of put it all together and it really helps you understand how to move forward as a head coach.
I need to get a button or some kind of noisemaker. I get super excited, partly because it's part of my personal story and journey in coaching as well. When a coach comes on here and says, "Oh man, I look back at my first and second years and I cringe. Like, oh, I want to call them up and say, I'm so sorry what I did." Because to me, that shows growth. Like if you're in your 10th, 20th, 30th year coaching, and you're like, oh yeah, the things I did my first 2 years coaching, I still do them. I'm a little concerned for you. I mean, I'm just like really like, wow, so that means you were at such a high level at year one, I mean, you just didn't have to change. Like that scares me. Luckily, rarely anybody actually says that. But when they say, "Oh man, what in the world?" Even to your point about like, how did I commute? You weren't even talking about X's and O's here when you said, "Oh, she showed me this letter. Oh my gosh, what did 23? Did I do like lyrics to Chumbawamba? What in the world was I doing?" And then you get it, and you're like, "Okay, all right, I understood a little bit about the human who is running this race, not just the stats of this person running this race." That means a lot. Where does we haven't talked, and you can share what you want or not want on this. That kind of compassion, empathy, understanding the human first. Again, a little bit of a learned trait. What did mom and dad do? Like, were they teachers or lobbyists? Were they what influence, or family members or teachers influence that kind of like, oh, care for the person first, the attitude that I keep kind of hearing from you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say, my dad he grew up on a dairy farm in Northwest Ohio. So I'd say that's probably where the work ethic
Mm-hmm.
comes from. But I also saw it in my both of my parents' work ethic, my whole upbringing in terms of being up early, working really hard. But then also when they were home with us, they were home with us and
Mm,
really present. But I
okay.
also will say my parents weren't parents to congratulate me for things that weren't awesome.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't awesome, and we weren't going to pretend that it was, but we also would highlight the good things and celebrate those things
Hmm.
as much as we possibly could. So I'm really grateful. Sometimes some people will ask both me and my sister, like, why do you work so hard? And it's kind of a hard question to answer. I don't know. Like, it just was a part of what we did growing up. We went to school, we did our homework, we played our sports, and rinse, repeat, and do it again. It seemed very simple, in a way that I understand with this generation, it's not as simple. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social
Yeah,
media.
yeah, yeah,
So
that's
there are
true.
ways in which like it felt very simple. And
Mhm.
I at times have to slow down to understand like it's not that simple for our young people in this day and age. But certainly watching my parents, reward hard work. I mean, true hard work and true performance, but also understanding like when you fail, like you don't need to feel bad that it's not celebrated. You just need to figure it out.
Right.
I would say is how I was raised, and that just probably still lives in me today.
Yeah, that's cool. Now I'm fascinated. I've had several guests from the Ivy League here, Harvard, Cornell, Brown, and I'm just absolutely fascinated with that level of collegiate athletics because it is, on one hand, radically different in regards to the style of kid that you have to recruit there. Talking about academics and not only I've learned not only just academics, but there's a mental um, person you've got to be to come into an Ivy League as well. But also, when you start talking about like the nuts and bolts of it, 4 years, no red shirting, no grad school programs, things like that. I'm always interested. The guys that I've interviewed typically have come from I almost said normal university, a non-Ivy League school, and then come into the Ivy League and had to learn all that. You right out like so your basis of like college coaching and recruiting is Ivy League, and then we went out to public schools, non-Ivy League 4-year schools. How did you? I mean, I guess you kind of came from a blank slate, like not totally blank because you were recruited, so you knew a little bit about like, oh, okay, there's official visits, and you had teammates that redshirted, I assume, at Wake Forest, things like that. You had transfers. How did you now, as the coaching side of that, when you started the Ivy League, how did you assimilate to the rules, the different kind of regulations, if you will, the different culture that Ivy League is versus non-Ivy League schools?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Hmm.
And so it was just getting in it. And the way that I'm wired is look at what's in front of you and then figure out how to maximize what you've got in front of you. And so at that point in my career, I really wasn't focused on like, what are all these non-Ivies doing? It's like, okay, how do we become really competitive within the Ivy League school, within the parameters that we have? And I'll be honest, I didn't put a ton of thought into, those perceived restraints
Oh,
that we
okay. I
had.
see. I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
And then in stepping to my next job at a state school, which most people forget that William and Mary is a state
That's
school,
right. Yeah.
learn that there are so many differences
Yeah.
in how you recruit admissions, financial aid, the red shirting, everything. So at that point, it was just really interesting to take that step back to be like, what do I like and what didn't
Hmm.
I like so much now that I know a lot more? And this isn't to sound anti-Ivy League, but I really liked having more freedom
Hmm.
in terms of the things that we could do, the decisions that we could make on behalf of our student athletes, but also how hard it is as an Ivy League coach to develop a student athlete for 4 years, knowing they're going to go somewhere else year five and really reap the benefits of all of that work, all of that development, and probably be at a place with less academic rigor. So kind of makes those coaches look brilliant when they go there. But those of us in it know like that really stand like you're standing on the shoulders of
Right.
the last 4 years. So just really interesting to reflect on that time, but also really grateful to not be within that environment and doing things,
Yeah.
outside of the Ivy League that we can do.
Yeah, it's fun because I'm usually asking the coach, so how did you change to where, there are no more red shirts? I'm going to ask the exact opposite of you. You go from Ivy League to start to William and Mary, a public school, and then on to Wisconsin, which I've got to talk about because we have mutual friend Mick Byrne there. I'm just absolutely in love with that guy. He's just one of the most amazing people that walk this planet, in my opinion. So how did you adjust the other way? How did you adjust to like, oh, I can redshirt kids and oh, I get their fifth year and I can get transfers in and things like that. Oh, and I don't have to, if a kid has another year, I don't have to worry about them leave, like having to leave if they want, they could stay here and do grad work. How did you adjust to that, the other side of it then?
Yeah, I just had some really great folks to work for there. So when I went to William and Mary, Dan Stimson, who was the longtime director of cross country and track and field, was a throws coach. He stepped down to be the throws coach, and they hired Steve Walsh, who had been at Providence College working under Ray Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
So got to learn from both of them. Like it was almost like having two directors to learn from. And I would say one thing that you didn't mention, which I felt like was the hardest thing to understand, is how do you appropriately scholarship a kid? Um,
Oh, right.
that
Yeah, of course.
wasn't something I had done at all. Like you go with
Sure.
financial aid read, and that's all you got.
Right.
So now it was like, wait, we have to do what? Like we have to assess potential and figure out all of these elements of what is this person worth to your program? And a
Right.
lot of things are more your gut feel, very confusing to enter into that environment,
Yeah.
but to be able to learn from both Dan and Steve in that environment, have such amazing leadership to figure that out. That was just fantastic. Same thing with redshirting, just asking a lot of questions. Okay, why are we redshirting her here? What's the thought behind that?
Right.
Um, and that's something that, I still carry with me to this day is like, let's make sure we look at this on an individual by individual basis, make sure it aligns with that student athlete's goals, make sure that your vision of the student athlete is the same as what the student athlete sees
Mm,
of their career. And if
right.
it doesn't, maybe it's you have to educate them why you have this big vision that they should be here for 5 years. Just learned so much. And that was a place I will say, I don't know if I've ever worked longer hours in my life than I worked at William and Mary because we were um, just doing so much for that program at the mid-major level, like not a ton of dollars to go around in terms of support services. Um, I probably have not learned more in a 3 year period in my life than I
Mm.
did in working there. And so it was just an incredible experience. I don't know if I can still stay up those hours that I was staying up at that age of my life. But I look back to it, I'm like, well, that's what you get from working that hard. I don't think anybody thought that that women's team would ever finish top 15 in the
Mm.
country based off of the recruits that we had, but we worked so hard on their behalf and developed some really strong relationships. And as a good friend of mine, Andrea Grove McDonough always says, you got to figure out how much orange juice you can squeeze out of your oranges. And at that school, I was like, we got as much juice as we could have out of those athletes. But it was so much fun to see their growth in a fairly short period of time.
Only leave the rind in some of them. Yeah. Love Andrea, by the way. Love the work that her and several other coaches do with our women's program at USTFCCA, our mentors mentorship program there, and just think highly of her. So I'm glad that that's a support person for you, and someone in your circle. I really really love that. So from William and Mary, you go to Wisconsin. Now, I was just up in Madison actually, just I think it's West Middleton for the Wisconsin Track Coaches Association clinic there, and I go to Madison quite often. I am friends with Mick and a lot of his staff. I'm friends. So do you know Zim?
Mhm.
Okay, all
Yep.
right, yeah. So
Yep.
Zim's has become a good friend, and refuses to allow me to stay anywhere. I have to stay with him and his family, and just I mean, just great people. I think of Madison. It's a beautiful town. It's a beautiful college town. The campus is awesome, uh, but the people I've met there are just awesome, awesome people. How did you enjoy your time there with Mick and the gang, and just Madtown in general?
Yeah, I think everybody knows I love Madison, Wisconsin. It's
Mm.
it's a great town. I loved living there. Um, I will say my perspective is like it started just feel like a family unit between, mixed friendship with Tom and Tom and his wife Judy, and
Mhm,
just
yep.
being people that we could lean on when we needed support, but also just relax, have a little fun with. And Tom was always ready and willing to help when I needed help.
He's amazing.
Full transparency, my car in Madison, I think it wouldn't start like every third day in the winter and the battery would die. Sure enough, Tom would show up to jump my car every
Of
time I
course.
called him. Which is, this unit where it felt like we're working really hard, but we're also finding ways to have fun with
Mhm.
this hard work. So to your point, yes, really great people. Learning from Mick of like when you come in the office, just be excited about what you're doing.
Mhm.
No matter if you know a hard day is coming, a lot of things are hitting the fan. It's like just come in. Like I always admire, he always came in, snapping his fingers, ready to go, ready to get to work and figure out how to move forward.
Right.
And so that's something that I still carry with me of like that energy that you bring in every day. Like it's going to impact people, whether it be your staff or your student athletes. Even if like we've had a hard day in the office and we're going to the locker room, it's like put yourself in check because
Mhm.
your energy that you enter the locker room with is what they're going to leave the locker room feeling.
Right.
And it's not to be inauthentic to who you are and be a robot and not be human, but understand like there are going to be a lot of days where you're going to deal with so much. But if you want to impact your group in a positive way and get them excited about doing the hard work, you have to bring the right energy to the locker room. That's something I really learned from him and saw, him instill not just in our staff, but his men's distance squad.
That's really important, and I'm not sure we've ever really tapped into that here. I'm gonna ask you a really like just totally hard, maybe impossible question to ask to answer. So how do you do that? And because when you're describing that, I get that. Like as a former as a leader here in Gill Athletics, it's very same thing. I have a team, right? And how I come into the office every day can absolutely direct positively or negatively the energy of our team. But for the coaching, I'm thinking the other way as well. So not only you've got a personal life and things good and bad happen in those, but the kids, the athletes themselves. So how do you manage? I don't know if it's right to say manage your emotions or manage how your emotions show up while also having to be concerned about the 20, 30, 40 young ladies that you have in front of you and their emotions and how they show up and knowing that they're 18 to 22 year olds, so maybe they don't have the same maturity level or definitely not the same experience you have as an adult. You've been through this a few years.
Yeah, and I mean, I've talked to my squad about this as recently as this fall of how important of a life skill emotional regulation is.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean we're shutting off our emotions. It means we're giving you skills to regulate to still get the most out of whatever environment that you're in especially when you're working with other people. Like I said earlier, this isn't to say that I'm going to be robotic and shut everything
Mhm,
off. I
mhm,
think there are times where it is really important for my student athletes to see my emotion and to be able to say, like, this is something like they need to know what I'm going through. So
mhm.
I'm really fortunate to have a staff that listens to me every hour of the day. I try to just kind of spill everything out to them, and then we settle on this really good spot. And often I'll ask them, like, is this something you think they need to know?
Mm,
And I'll really rely on their feedback of, yeah, I think you need to say that today.
mm,
Or don't think that's going to be helpful for them to understand. And so it really just depends on where I'm at as a human being, where our team is, and then making a decision. So slowing down
mm,
and being really intentional about what you enter the locker room with. So I don't want to make it sound like it's always like coming in and like Jill's at a 10 and everything is great. It's just slowing down to say, how do you want them to feel today? And there might be days where I go down and I am really fired up about something. And we talk through it as a staff. And it's like, is now the time? Like, is now the time to have this hard conversation? How do we want them to leave the team meeting? If saying these things aligns with how we want them leaving today,
mm,
let's go. If they're not aligned, let's pause.
mm.
We meet every single week with our high performance team, which is here at Northwestern. So wonderful to have a group of support staff members that includes sports psychologist, team physician, athletic trainer, dietitian, and our strength coach. And so a lot of times when I have these thoughts and these ideas, I look to them to be my coach that day. And so I have two phenomenal assistant coaches who help me work through all of these thoughts and ideas of how do we get this group to grow? Do we need to have fun today? Do we need to be intense today? What energy do we want them to feel? But then also with the harder things going on within a team environment, being able to lean on the high performance team that might not see our team as intimately, and that's just a different lens to look at a problem through, and helpful to get that opinion to say, hmm, that makes me pause, makes me think through some things, and maybe this could be handled in a different way. So that's what I love about Northwestern in terms of the overall support. So when I said earlier,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
support for female student athletes, it's saying like every team deserves to have this kind of support, and it is going to be comprehensive, mind, body, and soul. And then I, as a coach, am going to get coached by other people.
So,
So I will just say, like, there's just a lot of thought put into the energy that we bring to our team.
so double click into that because that's interesting to me. So you have this high performance team consist of your trainer, strength and conditioning coach. Did I hear you say mental coach or like sports psychologist?
Sports psychologist, yep.
Anybody else that I didn't say there?
Um, a team physician and our dietitian.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So I want to make sure I write these down: dietitian and team physician. So you the coaching staff meets with them weekly, and or how do they meet with the team? So tell me more about this. I haven't heard this. I'm sure maybe some other places are doing this, but I'm also sure maybe a lot of places aren't doing this. Help us maybe unpack that a little bit, so maybe someone listening can go back to their AD and be like, "Hey, I'm not sure we can get all 5 or 6 of these people, but can we start having meetings with these 3 people?" Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so our weekly staff meeting is an open invitation for that entire group. I by no means have an expectation that they're on every Tuesday morning with us, um, but they show up when they can show up on those calls. And then quarterly, we're always making sure we have a comprehensive check-in. That group actually did travel with me to convention last year to present the way that we do this, because we feel like it really benefits the student
Hmm.
athlete in incredibly meaningful ways. And so, what we really wanted to articulate to the coaching body is an understanding. Our team physician just said this in I think, a way that hit the coaches in the room really well, is like, understand that when you have a team physician, like, there's no specialization in cross country and track and field. We have to connect so that they understand our sport. They're not going to get that education in medical school. And so making these connections to create alignment within that group, that's one example, but also having an understanding that your student athletes are going to interact with this whole group, whether you like it or not. on a fairly regular basis if you have these resources at your institution.
Mhm.
So if there's not alignment and consistent communication, the student athlete might get confused about what is going on. And so, really important to us is making sure that that doesn't happen and that the consistent communication creates an alignment in what we're doing with the team at any given moment of the time, what conversations we're having with individual student athletes, and that group coming together. And it has been a unique experience for me across all the schools that I've coached
Yeah.
at, um, is something that I just see such a huge benefit to our student athletes. And, having the understanding that if our dietitian and our sports psychologist are in alignment, you have to think that sometimes, not saying that we're stepping out of our professional lanes, but at some point our dietitian is going to have to be a little bit of a sports psychologist and back and forth. And certain times student athletes will come to me where I really need to echo what is being said. If obviously if there's a release, no HIPAA violations here, but if there's the ability to have those connections and I can make sure that I am supporting the work going on in different areas, we're going to get to the greener pastures much more efficiently.
Right.
And so that's work that I feel is important to do every single week.
Yeah.
And it's not that every student athlete's going to feel it every single week, but it also helps us. We all do individual meetings with our student athletes, but then we also will program team meetings. So the team meets with our coaching staff 6 days of the week. We program short to long team meetings before each practice. But then our support staff will come in when we notice themes and say, like, let's talk about this element of whether it be our training, our recovery, our mental health, our mental performance, our sleep, all of these elements, what the themes that we're seeing. Then we have the experts that are able to come in, and get me to stop talking for a little bit, since I can be the person chirping. I'm like, if they hear me talk about their sleep one more time, please, someone with
Yeah.
way more initials after their name come in and explain this to them. So having that comprehensive support is just, it's just so incredible.
Hey, I've got kids. I've had teachers say something that I have told my kids 100 times, but the teacher says it and they're like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Well, where you been? I've been telling you that 100 times. What do you mean just because they say it? Get out of here." Well,
Yeah.
I think that is really, really cool for several reasons. The main reason, as I advocate and love on coaches, one of the things that I think, and it's been going on since day one. This is nothing new. I think coaches wear too many hats are kind of twofold. One, are required to wear too many hats, and sometimes voluntarily wear too many hats. Like, to me, I still think, and you being at Northwestern may 100% disagree with me here. I think it's crazy that coaches, track, football, baseball, doesn't matter, gets like bonuses or kudos for all academic teams. I'm like, you shouldn't be doing anything with academic. You should be leading, meaning you should not be down talking academics. But for you to be an advisor and all these like, there are other people that are way more specialized and intelligent than you that should be working towards that. And then you start talking about athletic training hats, sports psychologist hats, strength and conditioning hats, etc. And I'm like, man, you're supposed to be coaching. Like, I just feel like there's this like too many tugs going on with coaches. Again, sometimes required by outside sources, administration and society, and also voluntarily. So I love that you have, and Northwestern provides this this team. I mean, this is really your when you talk about your coaching staff, you're not just talking about your assistant coaches of the cross country team. You're talking about, oh yeah, this is my S&C coach. Oh, this is my sports psychologist coach. This is my team physician coach. I love that, and would hope and want and desire that for all of our coaches that are out there. May look differently at every different place, at every little place, but boy, that kind of trend, that's the kind of trend I think we need more in all of our sports. Again, we focus on track and field, but it's the same with our
And
football coach.
you make a great point. I mean, there's some institutions where you don't have all these support services, and that's a whole nother conversation. But for the institutions that do, it's like, how do you get all of these people to work together? Because ultimately they're all trying to do really good things, but without synergy in the room, some things can
Right.
start to go
Yep.
awry. And so that's really our goal in having this high performance team approach. And, they are medical staff members. They don't report to me. I'm not their boss,
Right.
but I want them really to feel like they're on our coaching staff because they have such a huge impact on our student athletes and their performance. And yes, they're not coaching them, they're not writing the workouts or implementing the workouts, but their impact on performance is profound. And so I, it's not that I just want them to feel that way. It's really how I view them is they are a part of our staff. And so if any of them end up listening to this, I apologize for how long I keep them on staff meetings and talk through everything. But I also so appreciate their willingness to listen
Yeah.
and like even our strength coach listening to every element of what we're doing so that she can get the most out of somebody in the weight room. Also something that I'm so proud of, and obviously I don't hire that entity that goes through a whole different hiring process, but the fact that my two assistants are women, and then I have that whole high performance team that are all female leaders within our program. Not to say that men can't do a great job within any of these entities, but for our student athletes to see a group of women at a high level working together on their behalf, number one, I think that's really impactful. Number two is them seeing these women in leadership positions
Mhm.
and the ability for those folks to connect with them, but also so they can see this right in front of them. I feel like it's just such a phenomenal experience for them.
Yeah, I wish we could get to a point where I could say I don't care that they're all women. Saying like, oh,
Yeah.
cool, two of them are dudes, two of them are girls. I don't care. It's they all earned where they were and were given a fair shake to be there. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And I advocate tremendously for women coaches and minority coaches. I've said this many times, and I won't stop saying it. I said this actually at the Wisconsin clinic last past weekend. When I look, and these are big swaths that I say here, big generalizations. When I look at our track and field athletes, I see roughly 50% men and 50% women. When I look at our coaches, I don't see 50% men, 50% women. When I look at our athletes, I see roughly 50% minority, 50% white. When I look at our coaches, I don't see anywhere near that same. And so that tells me there's something wrong that it may not need to equal up 100%, but it needs to be much more. At least the people, women and minorities, at least need to be given the opportunity to coach. More of them should be given the opportunity, and more of them should be encouraged to coach. So I can see how you're talking about with the team physician. Like I'm sure you have women. You're at Northwestern for crying out loud. There are women on your team that are like, man, I think I can be a doctor, but I don't know because I'm a woman. I haven't seen that. And then they see a woman physician, it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, okay. Cool, I see it. We've had many, many examples here on the podcast of minority and women coaches who, when they finally saw someone that looked like them that was also coaching, it was like, I never even crossed my mind that I also could do that. And then they go on to have an amazing career. So I love that. And normally at this point, Jill, I'm issuing a challenge to a coach like you. You have something like this, and I say, hey, more people need to know about this. I'm going to challenge you to contact Sam and the gang down there at UST. You need to do this tell the story at convention, and you're already doing it. So thank you so much. I love that. There's no challenge needed, at least in that aspect. So I do appreciate that. Connect some quick dots. So from Wisconsin to Northwestern.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. So let's get to Northwestern. So first of all, why? You're in the Big Ten, great conference. You're at Wisconsin, great program, great school, great city, full program, meaning cross country, indoor, outdoor, track and field, men and women, blah, 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 all that kind of good stuff. Everything from the outside we would say is like you've got the great setup, the perfect setup. And you go to Northwestern, which has cross country only, women only, no facilities that I'm aware of. What in the world are you thinking, Jill? Would you go to Chicago? And you go to Chicago, which I went to school in Chicago for a while. You're in Evanston, of course, but it's Chicago. Uh,
Yeah.
what in the world? What were you thinking, Jill?
Yeah, and just kind of to circle back to the beginning of the conversation when I talked about Jim Phillips hiring me. I'll never forget we sat down on a Friday afternoon, what ended up being a 3 hour long conversation after my interview. I'd actually come for a weekend and then I came back to sit down with him. Um, and we just had an incredible conversation about how if he empowered me, I could empower young women
Hmm.
at a much higher level, and how important it was for me to feel that support from him. And I did. And we talked on and on about the reasons why and what I wanted that to look like, um, both for my student athletes, but for other female coaches. We had a long conversation about the gender pay gap and where we're at. And obviously, the athletic directors, they have the numbers, they can see the numbers, and really wanted to make an impact for our female coaches in that respect. But also for me to go into a locker room full of young women saying, hey, you're going to need a lot of great women in your life to support you. You're also going to need a lot of great men in your life that are going to empower you and believe in you. And so that to me, alongside of the opportunity to lead my own program,
Mm.
just felt right, but it felt hard. It absolutely felt hard to leave Madison. It absolutely felt hard to leave Wisconsin. That team, that last team, full of superstars, that, I love like family, like that was really emotional and really hard for me. But really grateful that Mick supported me in that decision, understood it, allowed me to speak to my student athletes really openly and honestly about why I was taking that job, tried to hold it together, but didn't do so well. I can still see as we were at Camp of Champs in the basement with the team, and it just was like, oh, I really tried to hold this together, but this is my emotion because I really care and I
Yeah.
really cared about that group. But like what I said earlier, I also knew what I was signing up for. And at that point in time, it wasn't to make this into a cross country and track program. It was cross country only
Hmm.
for very specific reasons. I understood the hurdles. I won't call them roadblocks, but hurdles, to use a track pun, that I was going to have to jump over in
Yeah.
terms of the recruiting process. But um, something I love to do is finding a way to do something that people say there's no way you can ever do that.
Mm.
And I heard a lot of like, there's just no way they can ever be that good.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no, what you think you're going to take them to a national championship? How? Like, there is
Hmm. Hmm.
no way that you're going to do it. I'm like, watch me. We're going to figure this out. We are going to figure out how within this setup we can be the absolute best that we can be. And that was the vision from day one. It was so much harder than I expected.
Mm.
Um, I never want to go back to 2019, but also it seems kind of like a theme in my life. The hardest times I learned the most from, and I learned so much about how to build a culture, how to communicate effectively, but also how to see all the people in the department that can
Mm.
help me. It doesn't have to be a solo venture. And I would say if that's a weakness that I have, it's certainly present. I've gotten a lot better at it. It used to just be like, head down, I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And what Jim taught me was like, lift your eyes up, see who you have around you, and ask for help.
Mm.
And I was like, so I just call you? And he's like, yeah, you just call when you need help. First weekend I was in town, I really could not make sense of the budget. I was really struggling with how I was going to make things work. I worked, I mean, I don't even want to know how many hours I worked that weekend trying to figure it all out. Jim comes into the office Monday morning. How you doing? Not good. Jim, I'm not good. He's like looking at me like, how can you not be good? You just
Right.
started.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've been looking at these numbers all weekend. And he said, why didn't you call me? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just how I'm wired. And also to say, like, I'm a cross country coach. I don't know that I call the AD on a weekend when I'm struggling with something. But that's really the environment here is like,
Mm.
how can we help? How can we help you become the greatest version of yourself? To me, then that's a trickle down, right? If I have administrators doing that day in and day out, that's going to be my orientation toward my student athletes.
Mm.
If I am going to feel empowered by my administrators, I'm going to go empower my student athletes. And so that alignment of energy, and we've obviously gone through several leadership changes, but to now, have an athletic director who already in just, I think, 5 months, maybe he's been here, have learned so much from him
Mm.
in terms of how to lead, how to pour energy into people, how to create alignment, and then also find creative solutions to get what you want. And I say creative solutions because this is an environment in college athletics with a lot of change, and you might have to get out of your own way of thinking this is how we did it in the past. Like, nope, that's the past. So, what do you have right in front of you? What do you want? If it's a no, it doesn't have to be like, no, stop. It's okay, let's try to figure this out a different way. And just the gratitude I have for our leadership from our athletic director, our senior women's administrator, the folks we have down in policy and compliance, like these people we can go to anytime. And it's like all hands on deck, like all energy into what you're doing. Don't get me wrong. I understand the sports that generate a revenue and want to make sure those sports are taken care of and that our leadership can stay focused on that. But when I need help, I get help. And that's something also I want my student athletes to feel when they need help, they get help. And so the things that I took this job for, I'm really thankful that I can share that, like, those are the things that live on. And maybe in this moment in 2019, when I took the job, there was like thought about like, okay, I'm giving up a lot in terms of performance. You know, I've got someone who just won a national title, multiple Big Ten titles. I felt we could be on the podium across the next year, and I'm giving up a lot. But looking back in that moment, I'm like I did in terms of performance. If you want to compare 2019 Northwestern T-First to 2019 Wisconsin T-First, you will see that loud and clear. Um, Me as a coach, though, I gained so much in terms of my ability to lead, my opportunities here to learn. And so ultimately, those things are allowing me to impact student athletes at a greater level. And so I am still, and my staff and my student athletes today, I am still a wildly competitive human being. When we have a bad weekend, like I feel it and I struggle to function in many ways and it really, affects me to my core. But I've also learned here to make sure I'm always seeing the bigger picture.
Mm.
And the bigger picture is, are these student athletes learning? Are they growing? And growth doesn't have to look like a result.
Mm.
Something I tell myself is let's go with 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10, we're going to see that growth reflected in a performance. 1 time out of 10, we're not. We're going to see a boatload of growth, but there is going to be some barrier in the way that is out of our control
Yeah.
that we won't see it out in a performance. And that is okay because that still means that as a coach, I'm doing my job the right way. If I feel like this young woman is now going to go into the real world far more equipped to handle the challenges that she is going to experience moving forward. I think our student athletes tend to think like these are the hardest 4 years of their lives. You and I both know they're not.
Right.
Things are going to get harder for them. And at Northwestern, we pride ourselves on like this being hard. Like, let's let this be hard. So you are so much more equipped when you go into the real world. And before I stop talking about that, I want to make sure people hear like it's hard and fun.
Mm.
There is a way for things to be both. And my squad in 2019 probably didn't understand that. So till we started moving the needle forward, they were probably like, this woman does not know how to have fun. She certainly isn't funny. Um, this is not fun. And it's like, because we weren't working hard in the right ways. And now I think my squad would say like, oh, she's fun, she's funny. Like this is a good time, but it's because it's coupled with so much hard work. And when you can teach young women that hard work is fun and can be fun, and that doesn't mean that we don't have ups and downs, like we absolutely do. But when we have the downs, like we're connected and we feel it and we find a way to make a meaningful change to swing out of it, like that's such a cool environment to be a part of. And so what I'm getting at is that like my team environment is a direct reflection of I'll call it my work
Yep.
environment in terms of the interaction that I have with support staff members, with administrators, all the way up to all the folks I report to. And that's just a really awesome feeling as a coach to be like, my values align with this place. And I get to feel it in a professional setting all the way down to when I'm in the locker room. And that's something that just excites me every day about coming into the office.
Leadership matters. And so it's so cool to hear the leadership of Northwestern's athletic department. I never could understand why you would invest in something and then not take care of it, right? I don't buy a plant and then decide not to water it. I don't buy a car and then decide not to take care of it, oil changes, all those kind of things. So why do I have an athletic team that we don't support? And that support, to your point, looks differently. We're not going to have the same budgets as everybody else and things like that. But the other side of support is, do I feel welcome and I want to say protected and supported from my coworkers, from my boss, the AD, down to my lacrosse coach. Just bravo to Northwestern's athletic department for living the talk. We say these things a lot, but actually living it, maybe not so much. So I love seeing that Northwestern is living that out. Jill, so let's spend the rest of our time here. We're celebrating. This is a celebration email. That was my email to you, was celebrate. This is a celebration podcast. You're adding track and field, which is, you may think that it's unheard of. That never happens. I'm here to tell you, it actually does happen several times a year, by the way, guys. So cool to see a Big Ten school, Big Ten institution adding track and field. What can you share with us on the process of how that decision came about? And then we'll start talking about, okay, well, it's been announced. So now what, Jill? What do we do now to make a track and field team? Give us kind of some insight there.
Yeah, first I'll say really important to my sport administrator, our senior women's administrator, who's been just so supportive in this entire journey to enhance the experience of our female student athletes. That I say it's a cross country and track program,
Got it. Got it.
not in field,
Mhm.
because we are, we're staying distance only
Mhm.
in terms of supporting our distance runners and middle distance runners through the championship seasons for indoor and outdoor track. Certainly, like as we turn the corner performance wise, a couple years into my time here, I started to put my eyes on this of like how can we make this happen? Um, and I was able to learn from a lot of people of not just why we are the way we are, but also keep a finger on the pulse of like how things are changing in college athletics. So Jana Blay, our senior women's administrator who sits on the board of governors, is just such a great educator to me of what things are coming down the pike. What are they going to look like externally, but then also internally here at Northwestern? And how do we create a vision of being the best versions of ourselves? And so a lot of things came together this year that just really made this make sense. And so, I do want to give credit to our former and current student athletes because the truth of it is performance matters. In seeing our program continue to get better and better, a few ebbs and flows, but be consistently in the top three at the regional meet, going to the national championship, having some really good performances on the track that left student athletes on the outside looking in of those national championships and
Mhm.
could be competitive within the conference. That mattered. Also with the house settlement, the impending house settlement, I should say, and the roster maximums, there was just a lot of concern in the room of, wait, we are going to remove opportunities for these young women in this team, and that's not a road that we wanted to go down. And instead of saying we're going to have to reduce this roster to 17, kind of what I spoke to earlier, okay, that kind of feels like a hard stop, but why don't we get creative? Why don't we get
Okay.
creative with how do we say, like, no, we don't want to limit the opportunities of our current student athletes in future, but also we want to enhance their experience. And so there's one element. Another element would be as you look across what a lot of folks are doing within Division One, is you're starting to see a lot more event group specialization. And for some teams, that's in who's on their roster. For other teams, that's allocation of scholarship. But we're starting to see that trend, and the more competitive teams have specialized in one event group area or two, just starting to see those trends. And so this wasn't going to be like Northwestern's going to look so different
Mm.
to every other Division One institution, which was a previous concern. And now is like there, there's some external alignment, but most importantly, I loved feeling the energy from our athletic director, senior women's administrator, director of policy and compliance of like, let's figure out how we enhance the female student athlete experience. And this seems to make a ton of sense that we say now we have the track rosters of 45 if
Right.
House goes through. And so we can use those roster slots as opportunities to compete on the track, but also to develop. I love the development side of the sport.
Mhm.
I think it's so important to who we are. And I used to have a rule at Wisconsin, like if I let 5 walk-ons from Wisconsin on the team every year, one would for sure end up at a national championship for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that pretty much lived true for my
Mhm.
entire career there. And so I really don't want to lose that side of the sport. And so what this took was getting the right people in the room, having a real understanding of how your athletic department operates, while also continuing to survey the outside landscape.
Mhm.
And so I think we can all get caught up in the doom and gloom and where are we going and the fear and the concern. Um, but if any coaches kind of need like a light shine, and I get we're a very unique situation where we're going from cross country only, and that's not something that I feel like everybody, will understand how to connect into this sort of energy. But it's like take a good hard look at how your athletic department operates, what you want your program to look at, and it might need to be a creative solution. It might need to be something that doesn't look like what it looked like a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but you need to assess those things internally and get the right people in the room to make sure you have alignment on those things. And so that's, what our athletic director really like hit the ground running with was like, let's make sure we have alignment in the room. What's the vision? Are we on the same page? And now how do we move the needle forward in getting these things to happen? He's very much about action and let's get this across the finish line. He said that so many times. I'm like, I love this track pun. Let's get this
Yeah.
across the finish line. And so that's how we got to where we did in January.
I didn't even think about cross country only programs and specifically a successful cross country only program with the roster limit of 7. I didn't even think because in my head I was like, oh yeah, earlier I said, you're staring at 20, 30, probably 40 kids on your roster. I didn't even think like, oh, tomorrow, air quotes, that's 17 and only 17. Didn't even think about that aspect. So before, so 2024 season, you obviously ran a full slate of cross country program, Big Ten cross country championships, and then nationals, regionals, and nationals. For track, you were this is a question mark. You were allowed to compete indoor and outdoor track. You just couldn't compete at the conference championships. And what other limitation did you have?
Conference and national championships.
Oh, you couldn't qualify for nationals.
No, that rule changed, I believe, in 2017. So
Oh,
in 2017, the Coaches Association voted on the allowance of cross country only athletes to qualify for national championships on the track, and they voted that out. So in
okay.
2017, that changed.
That
The
makes
folks
sense.
recruited under that rule got grandfathered in, but that went away for anybody after that time.
That makes sense. I used to coach. My last place was at Mississippi State. We didn't have men's indoor, but we had men's outdoor. Uh, but we could compete during the season, just not at SECs. And if a kid was good enough, we could choose to go to NCAA's, et cetera, if they qualified. That makes sense. Okay, so I kind of I think I maybe haven't heard this because the prevailing consensus was, hey, if you're not going to support the sport as an official sport, you shouldn't qualify. Like it's almost like a loop. It really was a loophole, is what it was. I get it now. Okay, so now we're going to have women's indoor and outdoor track. So there's not there's your regular old track team that just happens to have majority of distance runners and probably no hammer throwers at your area. I get it. So did you already have a full slate of indoor? Like, do you got to create a whole indoor outdoor schedule now, or is that already kind of baked in because you were kind of doing it?
So we will start this next year, so 25, 26.
Hmm.
And so we will adjust our track schedule accordingly
Hmm.
to make sure that we meet those minimum sponsorship requirements so that
Right.
we're
Yeah.
taking
Hmm. Hmm.
14 to 8 meets across indoor
Hmm.
and outdoor. So our schedule will look different, not night and day different, but certainly more competition, more student athletes going to each
And
competition
and Big Ten championships. I mean, that's
and the Big Ten.
a heck of a meet, man. Ooh, holy cow.
Here we
Holy
go.
cow. Yeah, buddy. Well, you know it. You've been to the cross country. That again, that's no slouch itself when you talk about Big Ten championships, the cross country meet. It was fun. It was right here in Champaign for the first one with our West Coast friends in the Big Ten. It's really exciting to see. It was really interesting. It was a little odd, I'll say, seeing the runners come by. I see Northwestern runners. That makes sense. I see Indiana runners. Okay, that makes sense. There goes a UCLA runner. And I was like, oh, wait, that's not right. What are you, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's going to take a little bit to get used to, but, and you got to go, well, this year they'll go out to Oregon for Big Ten outdoor championships, which again is just the most crazy wild thing in the whole wide world. So what's got you? I got just you okay for another minute? I am over time
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
So
we're good.
what's got you excited about this? I know many things you've expressed many things, but this is going to be different for you guys as you look to. I mean, you're gonna strategize when you go into indoor and outdoor Big Ten championship, even though you're not going to cover all the events. I'm knowing you well enough now that you're going to be like, hey, how do we maximize what we're doing with also the big picture of nationals in purview there? What's got you excited that hey, there's a like we actually we sponsor track and field now. We sponsor track at Northwestern now.
Yeah.
I
Gianna,
caught
thanks you.
myself. I caught myself.
That's what's been so much fun for the last month or so as we turn this corner. As I explain it, it's been a long time since I've been this busy, but when you're this busy for so many good things,
Sure,
a lot
yeah.
of times as coaches, when we get really busy, it might not be for the best things, but this is just such, so many amazing things coming across our desks and thoughts and meetings that we're having. And so the energy from myself and my staff in terms of how do we want to recruit to this program? How do we want to develop a middle distance squad? How do we want to cover these events?
Right.
And the new level of talent that we've been able to attract and get excited in the last month has been
Yeah.
really, really fun. But also really exciting when I told the team that, we're going to sponsor indoor and outdoor
Yeah.
championships and they're all excited. I'm like, we're going to be excited for a bit. And then we're going to have to turn this corner to like, what does that really mean? And you said it, we're going to have a Big Ten indoor championship here in a couple of weeks. Our team will be having a watch party and I will be sitting there watching very diligently about
Yeah.
what it actually takes
Yeah.
um, and starting to say, like, okay, well, where are we today? And here's the great thing. I don't need you to be there tomorrow. I don't need you to cut corners. I don't want you to cheat the process. We do need to be there in a year. And how are we going to
Hmm.
start drawing the line of we know where point A is, where is point B, and how do we make sure that in a methodical way we're stepping towards this? Um, it's not that I want to go out recruit everybody that we have on our roster. Everybody we have on our roster has this incredible opportunity of this bar just went so high up and we can do this. It's going to take a ton of diligence. It's going to take a ton of hard work to go to our first Big Ten championship and show up in the way that we want to show up. But it's been so fun to field their questions, hear their ideas, see the look in their eyes when they talk about these times. And I mean, as you watch the indoor season, you're like, oh my gosh, like 420s is the new 430s in the mile. And you have two choices to get scared by it or get motivated by it. And to watch our locker room get really motivated to make the changes needed to get there. Cause that's what it is. Like what we talked about so much earlier. It's gotta be willing to take a good hard look inward, to take constructive criticism, to make a change and figure out how do we start stepping forward in a more expedient way. So that's been really fun for us. So the two things, like the recruiting side of it, and like how do we just motivate the heck out of the group that we have in the locker room and get them to believe in themselves. Like they need to believe in themselves at that level. And if they don't, like, let's work on that. Let's make sure the belief is in place to drive those actions forward. And so that's been really fun for us to tackle both of those things. And excited to watch the Big Ten championship here in a couple weeks down in Indianapolis,
Yeah.
and then excited to be there next year.
You watch it with a different eye now for sure. That's right.
And I've told them all in the locker room. I think my first year at Wisconsin, we were a good team. We were 10th at the national championship in cross country, and we got our asses kicked at indoor Big Tens
Right. Hmm.
in a way I wasn't ready for.
Hmm.
At William and Mary, we didn't have a conference indoor championship,
Hmm.
and I'll fully own, like, I was not ready for it.
Hmm.
And it was really hard to watch. And I told my student athletes, like, the good thing is I know what the old Big Ten looked like, and that was really challenging. And now we're going to watch the new Big Ten, and it's going to be even more challenging. But we can get up for that challenge and get excited, and be really motivated to get ourselves in a good place by that time.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. With holding breath though, as a former SEC coach before A&M and Missouri was there, it's hard for me to look at the SEC and see Missouri and A&M and now Oklahoma and Texas. It's just like, oh, that's just not fun. Like it wasn't fun when there was 12 of us killing each other. Big Ten, same thing. Big Ten, call it last year, a bloodbath. I mean, it's amazing how good you have to be to score. And now you're adding Oregon, Washington, not Stanford, Oregon, Washington. Who am I missing? Oh my gosh, UCLA, USC. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come USC right now as we talk, the number one team in the nation on the polls. They're coming into your conference. I mean, that changes that landscape tremendously. Come on. That's crazy. It's just a mini nationals is what it really ends up being. You just have two national meets. You have one that's you only invite 16 teams to, and then the next one you invite everybody. So, well, Jill, what is awesome? I sit in a very unique seat of being, the biggest fan of track and field and coaches and cross country coaches. And so, what's going to be interesting to me, I love you mentioned 2019 Tifers, Northwestern Tifers. Thank God for Tifers, by the way. We need to get this in all of our high schools so we can see kids from ninth grade all the way through their senior years at Northwestern to see their progressions because coaches are doing an amazing thing, and I like to see those the progressions on the track. Uh, but I can't wait. We're looking at if I were to go to look today, I'd be able to see 2024, 2025 Northwestern Tifers. I can't wait to see what does 2030 look like? What does 2035? Because the growth, that healthy things grow. And when you add track, when you add opportunities for young people to achieve success, they step up. That's the cool thing about adding USC and Oregon, all these guys to the Big Ten. As good as the Big Ten was, it's about to get better because these kids will step up because coaches will have them prepared to step up. So sitting on the sidelines, man, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your staff. I'm excited for your high performance team. I mean, they're part of this entire equation, and certainly excited for your athletes and future athletes that are going to go there. They're going to pioneer, do something unique inside of NCAA. I hope that there's other people taking notes. There's other cross country only programs that I hope are watching, going, all right, wait a minute, what are those guys doing over there? They're doing it. They're doing it well. We could do this. And again, healthy things grow. So hopefully that continues to grow our great sport inside of track and field and cross country, and you become a model. The challenge is going to be, Jill, okay, now you get to speak at convention to talk about, hey, how do you take a cross country program to an entire track program and how you did it uniquely there in Evanston, Illinois. So that's going to be the next challenge one day. You gotta spread that wealth, spread that knowledge, and spread that encouragement to others that are out there.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to dig through a lot about me I haven't thought about for
Yeah.
quite a while. But also to share, what we're doing here at Northwestern. I think it's probably become abundantly clear through this conversation. Like, I'm just so happy to be where I am when I am here with the changes in college athletics, to be at a place like this where I think if anybody listening has met with a sports psychologist, you've probably heard something talking about how the best results come from environments where there's high challenge and high support.
Mm.
And so kind of the grid there of high challenge, high support versus low challenge and low support, and the combination. And great things don't happen when you have high challenge and low support, but really fantastic things happen when you have high challenge and high support.
Mm.
And so being in a place right now where the challenges are really high, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah.
It could be navigating this new environment, stepping into the new Big Ten. You can look at it on a lot of levels,
Right.
but here having such high level support is what makes all the difference. And my gratitude for that, I really cannot quantify, but just feeling like, hey, there's a reason why I'm here right now
Yeah.
feels really, really good. And to have an athletic director who really cares about our coaches,
Yeah.
really cares about our student athletes, will slow down to make sure each and every one of us are excited about coming in and doing our jobs. And when we're not excited, let's talk through it. Let's figure that out because we have to stay there. We have to stay excited about what we're doing so that our student athletes can be impacted in the right ways. So just I continue to learn and grow so much here and feel really good about the fact that we can let those things trickle down to our student athletes here.
Jill, the most valuable thing that you can give me is your time. I'm so grateful. I know you're busy. You're even more busier now, if that's possible. And knowing now from your background as an athlete, you like to continue to push, push, push. So I know that finding a sliver of time is a hard thing, and you've even allowed me to go over that time. So just grateful for you. Grateful for the help from your athletic department, your SIDs as well, getting everything scheduled and getting everything going and looking good in the background and all that kind of good stuff, man. So just thankful. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Well, thank you for doing what you do, and hopefully we're not too far apart. So hopefully our paths cross soon, especially with us being at more championships in the near
That's right.
future.
Absolutely. Guys, if you're listening, here's the cool thing. Pay attention. Let's watch what happens there at Northwestern, how they do. They're not only kind of navigating something kind of new here and how they're going to treat distance running and track, but they're doing it inside this new environment of the House versus NCAA settlement. And we still, every day changes. We literally today, as we're recording today, a little bit of guidance came out. There's still a lot more guidance. I don't think we still have guidance on like how do you do red shirts and do you get to replace in the middle of season and all these kind of things. Still a lot of things that our coaches need to know how to navigate, and they will. That's what they do. If you're not adaptable, I'm not sure you're cut out for this profession, being a track coach. That's for sure. But let's watch what these guys are doing, and let's see where can we learn. I think there's full track and field teams that can learn from how they're going to do things. I think there's certainly cross country only programs that can learn, and let's just watch and cheer because at the end of the day, they're giving more young people a positive impact and opportunities to achieve success both academically and athletically. And you know what? That's what you're in the game for. That's why you're a track coach. So thanks for being here again this week. I appreciate you guys continually hitting play, and join us next week, and we'll do it all over again. Thanks, everybody.